Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Portman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is a pleasure to have you before the committee. As I told you, Mr. Panetta, we had the opportunity to speak. I'm delighted to see that a former OMB director can actually make something of himself. You've done a great job as director, and I know that you've had the opportunity today to answer some tough questions, but also I'm sure that the tone has been appreciative and respectful. I am most concerned, as you know, on the budget front, and particularly with regard to our major acquisitions programs. The cost growth, the time delays have been particularly troubling to me on this committee over the last 4 or 5 months. We've heard lots of testimony. And this is at the same time, of course, that we're talking about not just restraining spending, but actually putting everything on the table to deal with our historic deficits and the debt overhang that is affecting our economy so directly and affecting our future. So this concerns me greatly. It also, I think, impacts our national security because our men and women in uniform need the best equipment, and they need it in a timely manner, and they're not getting it. A couple data points, and you know them well. Cost overruns annually now are, in some years, over $300 billion a year. This is as compared to just a decade ago when annual overruns were, on average, about $40 billion a year. The average delays, almost 2 years in delivering initial capabilities for these programs. The reasons are varied. Sometimes it's internal Department of Defense processes, I think. Sometimes it's these contracting processes that still aren't working, and these practices have been subject to a lot of GEO reports and directives and public and private studies, and there's been some good work done on it, and the Chairman's done some good work on it. But we still have a long way to go. So this would be one of my major concerns, and given your background and experience, I think you're well qualified to address it. So I'd like to hear a little about that. Senator Graham apparently talked earlier today about cost-sharing arrangements and the potential for that. I think that is an interesting idea. On the Joint Strike Fighter program alone, we heard testimony before the committee that we're 80% over cost from the original estimates. That's over $150 billion, and 30% more than the current baseline that was just set in 2007. So after 15 years of development and 2 years into operational production, we still don't have a stable design. And again, I think that impacts our warfighters as well. So again, I realize your department's, the Defense Department is working on implementing the Systems Acquisition Reform Act, and Better Buying Power initiative is ongoing. But frankly, there's a lot more that needs to be done. Could you talk a little about this, and particularly the benefits of competition, as we talked about privately, and finding efficiencies?
Senator, because we share a common background, I think we understand the costs that are involved in this area. I think you know, we're dealing with a culture that's developed that somehow we've got to change. And I know during the period, you know, from 9/11, there's been an awful lot of money that's been put into the defense budget, a lot of equipment that's been developed during that period, and I think at the same time, a lot of it is certainly been worthwhile, been important to our national defense, but a lot of bad habits have developed during that period. And I think there's an assumption that somehow this thing can play out, and that the costs can increase as dramatically as you've pointed out in some of these areas, and that somehow somebody's still going to pay the bill. I think what we've got to do is to make clear that those who are involved, and they're great companies, they're good people, a lot of them do a great job, that they've got a responsibility here to be able to work with us, to develop better competition, to do some of the things that Senator Graham mentioned in terms of absorbing some of the costs of development. The work that they're doing is not just money in their pocket. What they're working on is important to the national security of this country. And I think what we have to do is work with them, work with contractors, work with others to try to develop approaches that can try to shave the costs that are involved and the delays that are involved here. I know this is tough. I know that some of these This military technology is extremely intricate. It involves a lot of complicated work, but I'm absolutely convinced that there's got to be a way to achieve greater cost savings. And I hope to work with you and others to try to see what we can do to do that.
Well, I'm encouraged from our conversations and this testimony today that you are prioritizing that. And I mean, ultimately, if we don't fix it, we'll be robbing from some of the fundamental responsibilities you would have as Secretary of Defense to protect our country, because looking at some of these projections over the next decade or 2 decades, if we don't begin to figure out how to deal with these overruns on the acquisition programs, they will quickly take the entire current defense budget. So we need to be sure that our men and women in uniform are getting what they need, and be sure that this and the healthcare issue, which I know you've also addressed here today, is the other one where I think you look at the huge cost increases there, has to be handled in a way that, again, ensures that the focus is on our national security concerns. Quickly on trade agreements, as you're aware, we're hoping soon to be reviewing proposed export opening agreements with the Republic of Korea, with Panama, and with Colombia. And as has been increasingly clear in the post-Cold War environment, all elements of our national power must be used to provide for our security and build effective allies. And these 3 countries are great allies, as you know. In response to prepared questions, you noted that the U.S.-Republic of Korea alliance remains one of the cornerstones of U.S. strategy in the Asia-Pacific. I found that interesting. And you have pledged to stay in close contact with your counterparts there and build on the relationships laid by Secretary Gates. You also noted the importance of the government efforts to support DoD activities, providing training, equipment, and so on to our Central American partners, including Panama, given the importance of the canal particularly, and the Southern Command's work there. And also with regard to Colombia, in testimony earlier this year, the commander of Southcom described our trade agreement with Colombia as, quote, a very positive, beneficial aspect for our cooperation because of a growing capacity to support the capabilities of armed forces and law enforcement. So my question would be to you, how do you assess the value from a security standpoint of building upon these commercial ties through these trade opening agreements with these allies? And do you agree that these enhanced trade and investment agreements is one way to combat the threats that these states face to their security and to the broader region?
Right. Senator, I think that when it comes to protecting our security, there are a number of areas that have to be addressed, and one of those, obviously, it's not just the military responsibility, but there's an economic side of this that plays a very important role in terms of promoting better security. The ability of these other countries to develop trade with us, to develop their economies, creates greater stability within those countries. I think that's a fact. And to the extent that we can help promote that kind of trade, that we can promote that kind of economic development, I think it assists these nations in their ability to achieve stability. Colombia is a good example. They've done a great job going after narco-trafficking. If we can help, be able to help them develop their economy, that could become another added factor in providing greater security in that region. And the same thing is obviously true for Korea.
So do you think the ratification of these 3 agreements would be positive for our national security interests?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Portman.